Mining Colony, a game by Steve Finn, published by Dr. Finn's Games. This is a game set in space where we're gonna mine different kinds of materials and then we're gonna build our colony. The components are very neat: cardboard, wood, and crystals. Very nice. And mechanic-wise, the game combines auction with tiling, which are basically two of my favorite game mechanics, so really high expectations from this one. Now, each player will have their personal board where they will be placing stuff to build their colony. If there are resources that you don't want to place immediately, you can place them in this area here. You can place up to 5 credits. We'll see how those are. And then you can place a rocket, a crystal, and a worker there. And these can be later moved to your board. Some areas already start developed, and those are the ones with a dark background. The other ones are not developed yet. Then we have a board that goes in the middle of the table, which is used to organize the tiles that we will acquire. And there are also 4 spaces. As you can see, there are 4 spaces. The game lasts 10 turns. Each turn is represented by a card from this deck, so this also represents the timer of the game. At the beginning of each turn, you flip a card face up, and then you place the corresponding resources in the spaces there. I already did that for you. See how nice I can be. And so in that space, for example, we have a 3 tile or a 3 square tile, a red worker, which is kind of brownish in reality, white and green crystal, and so on and so forth. And that's for how we prepare for the turn. Now, each player also has a little deck, such as this one. You will draw 3 cards, and the cards have various numbers. Simultaneously, each player chooses 1 card and places it face down in front of themselves, and the other 2 go at the bottom of their deck in any order. And so each player will have a card ready. Then we reveal all of our cards. Boom, boom, and boom. And we're gonna start selecting materials from the board, starting from the player with the highest card going down. So this is the auction element. So green, for example, decides that they really want the materials here. They take it and place it on their board. Then it's blue. Blue is me. Blue's turn, and I decide that I want these things, and so on and so forth. So everybody will have some stuff to add to their personal board. Tiles that we acquired. Tiles that we acquire needs to be orthogonal adjacent to already developed areas. So we have some at the beginning of the game, and maybe I decide to place it like so. That will be legal. Later, if we have more tiles that are added, again, they can be added as long as they're adjacent to something that has been developed, like so, maybe. Now, we also have other stuff to place, right? We have our workers. They go in domes, and so that would be a legal placement. Again, if I can't or do not want to place a worker in a dome, I can place 1 here, up to 1. Let's suppose that I really like that guy there, or gal, I don't know, or non-binary pal, who knows. Crystals, they go in these sort of labs, storage areas. Some are color-coded. For example, this one only takes yellow crystals, this one only takes purple crystals. Perfect, just the other ones that I have. But luckily enough, some are wild, so I could place these ones there, for example. Or again, remember, I have an area there which also is wild, for example. Suppose, more interesting, that actually I acquired a yellow crystal for the sake of the exemplification. Booyah, there. Rockets, so those cards may also give me rockets, and the rockets that I get need to go on launch pads. Booyah, something like that. Now, If I cannot or I do not want to place a component that I just got, if it's a crystal or a rocket or a worker, I can discard it and receive a credit instead, and I can save up to 5 credits at the end of my turn. Credits can be spent to buy these build over tokens. They need to be placed on top of things that are already there. So for example, like that, I cannot place it in the middle of nowhere. And they represent domes. They represent nothing. Maybe I just want to cover something at some point. They also represent launch pads and again storage spaces for crystals. As the game progresses, I should try to create, to fill up as much of my board as possible. Again, suppose that this is what happens after a couple of turns. Now, if by placing components, I have placed a worker and a rocket of the same color, orthogonally next to each other, sort of next to each other, with an intervening empty developed space in between, then I get to build one of these structures of that color. The number of these structures is limited. There is one fewer for each kind than the number of players. So there is a brown and a black one. Once they're gone, they're gone. Other things that I can build kind of magically like that. If there are 2 crystals of the same color with one space in between, which is developed and empty, then I build a science center of that color. So I got 2 yellow crystals, I meet all those rules, then I get that science center. And again, there is one of each color. For each color, there's one fewer. The number of players, when they're gone, they're gone. So this is how the board will look like as you place workers on it, as you place rockets, crystals. For example, I place a purple one here and then another purple. Now I get one of these if they're still available. Get more tiles, etc., etc., etc. Continue like this for 10 turns. Now remember, as the card that we use for bidding goes out of the game and the other 2 go at the bottom, your deck will become thinner and thinner, and so you may choose. There's also an element of deck manipulation, deck unbuilding, really, as you will have a saying in what is left in your deck later in the game. And at the end of the last turn, you'll be left always with 2 cards, which is important. At the end of the last turn, these are the things that we will score. Each structure and lab of those limited supply things that you have is worth 2 points. Each crystal and each wooden component on your board, each work and each rocket is worth a point. So even if you cannot build those awesome structures anymore, just get as much stuff on there as you possibly can. Just do it because it's good. Each 2 credits that you have saved at the end of the game are worth a victory point. Then you look at the value of the 2 cards that are left there that you saved for the end. Play with the highest total there, score 6 points, then 3, then 1. And you lose a point for each undeveloped area on your board. Put all of those points together from all of those sources. The player with the highest score wins the game. Mining Colony is a nice, simple, fun filler. And it's nice to have games like this in one's collection, I believe, because they can work as a nice filler during game night, and there's enough here to keep a serious player of board games entertained for sure. But also the simplicity, the intuitive element of the game is such that you could play with your family, you can play with non-gamers. I play with my kids, I play with the spouse also. She's a busy woman, doesn't have time to play long games these days, and she also enjoyed this game. Also, she won, which made her like the game even more. Maybe one little caveat is that I think the game can play, 1 to 4, it says, and the solitaire option is quite neat. I tried it, I enjoyed that one. Very challenging. And if you're not playing solo, though, I would say 3 to 4 players, because with 2 players can be a little bit tug of war-ish. You're only going to use some of those spaces. You're not going to fill up the board with 2 players. And so the options that you're given, very often there's a really good one and one that is obviously not quite as good. And so bidding becomes more confrontational than with more than 2 players. If you're, say, second, you may still get something good. There isn't quite an obvious distance between best and worst. And so there's a lot more flexibility there. So I'm going to recommend it especially for solo players and 3 to 4 players, not quite as much for 2 players only. But that's a minor thing. Even with 2 players, the challenge is still pretty good and fun. Because, again, the game happens to combine 2 of my favorite mechanics, auction and the tile laying. I like the idea of trying to figure out what the opponent is doing, to beat them just by enough without overbidding, which I'm terrible at. I should say bidding or auction is probably my favorite mechanic in which I suck the most at it. But I still enjoy. Because here you have, of course, the idea that the cards that you don't use, they'll come back later. So maybe I'm going to use that high card later. Maybe I'm saving it for the final scoring, which can be crucial. I've seen games decided by those 6 points for the player who has saved the most. Of course, that makes sense only if you didn't do terribly before. So you still need to do good enough during the game. But at the end, you have that final bump if you're able to save the right cards, which I'm never able to do. That's just a little biographical thing. But again, it's really nice because you have that final almost catch up with the leader element. It looks like somebody's doing better, but then you have that element there. So the game doesn't feel like it was decided early on, which is a really smart touch. So a lot of interesting things, a lot of competition. It's definitely competitive because the resources are limited. Everything that I got on the board, I am potentially taking away from somebody else. Those extra structures that I'm building with crystals, launch pads, and workers, limited supply. If I'm taking it, you're not. But I'm never removing things from your board. It's always a matter of competing for resources. And that's, again, one of the tenets of modern gaming, that we turn confrontation from taking stuff away to taking opportunity away, which somehow feels less negative. So it's a competitive game, and highly so, but not one that feels overly confrontational in a negative way. Nice little puzzle, a lot of interesting decisions, a lot of again gameplay packed into a filler that plays in under half an hour, and you could play with your family, you can play with your non-gaming friends. So high praise from me for Mining Colony.